A single touch can rewrite the fate of our world. Deep within the roots of a petrified forest, a young botanist named Alara unearthed a seed that pulsed with a strange emerald light. Her connection to plant life was always uncanny, but this was different. This was a call. When her fingers brushed its surface, a latent energy flared to life, awakening something within her and stirring the ancient woods from their slumber. This is the story of the Emerald Arks, the legendary sanctuaries that allowed ancient forests to survive global cataclysms. By the end, you will understand the hidden forces that have preserved life on our planet through its darkest hours and the fragile hope that rests in our hands today. What secret did that pulsating seed hold, and what ancient power did it awaken in a modern world racing toward its own collapse? What does it truly mean to hear the forest speak? Back in the sterile quiet of her research outpost, the seed's emerald pulse felt like a living heartbeat in Alara's palm. It began to emit a low, resonant hum, a vibration that seemed to tune the very air. On her desk, a tray of long dormant acacia seeds, kept for control groups, suddenly shivered. Before her eyes, tiny green shoots erupted, unfurling into miniature canopies in a matter of seconds. Her breath caught. This was not just life, it was life accelerated, commanded. She focused her will on a single, withered fern in the corner, envisioning it lush and green. A wave of warmth flowed from her, and the fern's fronds uncurled, their brown crispness softening into vibrant emerald. She could direct this energy, a conductor for a symphony of growth. Dr. Arks, her mentor, happened to walk in during one of these experiments. He stared, his usual calm demeanor shattered by sheer, unvarnished awe. He saw a technology, a key to reversing desertification and healing scarred lands in years, not centuries. He spoke of grants, global applications, a new era for their field. But as he outlined his visions of managed reforestation projects, Alara felt a cold dread. To him, the seed was a tool, a miraculous engine, but to her, it was a voice. It was a trust. She sensed a profound consciousness within its light, a fragile, ancient will that demanded guardianship, not utilization. The conflict coiled tightly in her chest. Her scientific mind warred with a deeper, instinctual knowing, revealing the full scope of the seed's power. Its sentient connection to her felt like a profound betrayal. It would be catalogued, prodded, and ultimately disconnected from the mystery it represented. So she made a choice. She showed Dr. Arks the accelerated sprouting, but she hid the way the seed sang to her in her dreams. She concealed her ability to channel its energy with a thought, blaming the more dramatic effects on unpredictable volatile organic compounds. It was her first lie to the man who had guided her career, and it created a chasm between them, filled with the unspoken truth. This single act of concealment changed everything. Her outpost, once a place of open collaboration, became a cage of her own secret. The professional isolation was a price she was willing to pay, but the consequences were already spreading beyond the lab walls. The local ecosystem began to shift. Moss grew thicker on the north side of the buildings, and wildflowers bloomed out of season, their colors preternaturally vivid. The seed was not just responding to her, it was broadcasting, its energy signature subtly rewriting the rules of life around it. Then that night, a report came in from a monitoring station miles away. A whole patch of woodland, healthy just that afternoon, had undergone a sudden, synchronized wilting. The plants were not dead, but dormant, as if every ounce of vitality had been instantly pulled from them, drawn back toward a single, glowing point. Her secret had already been noticed, and something was answering. The forest floor felt wrong under her boots, too soft and silent. Alara pushed through the undergrowth toward the coordinates from the report, and the sight that greeted her was not one of death, but of profound theft. The trees stood, but their leaves were a pale, papery gray, clinging to branches that seemed to have aged decades in a single night. The air carried no scent of decay, only a sterile emptiness. Kneeling, she placed a hand on the trunk of a young oak. It was cold. With her other hand, she clutched the emerald seed, its gentle pulse a stark contrast to the stillness around her. She could feel it, a deep and chilling absence. This was not a natural blight. The life force had been cleanly siphoned away, leaving the plants in a state of suspended animation. Driven by a desperate need to fix what was broken, she focused the seed's energy on a single, wilted fern. A shimmering wave of green light flowed from her palm, washing over the plant. The fern trembled, its gray fronds flushing with color, uncurling toward the sky as if waking from a bad dream, but the triumph was short-lived. A wave of vertigo slammed into Alara. Her knees buckled, and a cold sweat broke out on her skin. It felt as if a part of her own vitality had been pulled out with the energy she had channeled. The seed's power had a cost, and her body was the currency. This successful, costly reversal changed everything. It proved the emerald seed could fight this unnatural withering, but it also painted a target on her back. Whoever or whatever had caused this would have felt her counterstroke, a surge of pure life energy in a place they had left for dead. She was no longer just a curious botanist with a secret. She had become a medic on a battlefield, and she had just announced her presence to the enemy. The moral weight of the decision was crushing. To intervene on a larger scale would drain her, possibly beyond recovery, and would expose her completely. To do nothing was to condemn these ancient woods to a slow, silent consumption. The choice was made for her in the deep, instinctual pull of the seed itself. It hummed with a new urgency, a clear, directional need. This blight was a direct threat to the very world it was sworn to protect, the ancient forests it called home. She had to find the source. Committing to this search transformed her role entirely. She was an active protector now, a participant in a conflict she barely understood. As she made her decision, a faint, sickly green light seemed to pulse in response from a nearby patch of earth. Brushing away the mulch and soil, she uncovered not rock, but a thick, gnarled root. It was part of an immense subterranean network, and it throbbed with the same parasitic energy that had drained the forest. The trail did not lead outward, but down, pointing deep into the darkness beneath the world she knew. The gnarled root pulsed with a sickly light beneath her fingertips, a sinister roadmap leading into the earth. Driven by the seed's urgent pull, Alara squeezed into a narrow crevice, descending into a darkness that soon gave way to an impossible, subterranean glow. She emerged into a cavern, so vast its ceiling was lost in shadow. All around her, a colossal root network webbed the walls and floor, pulsing with soft emerald and gold light, like a subterranean aurora. This was no mere fungal web. It was a living tapestry, a nervous system for the world's ancient forests, thrumming with a low, collective hum of shared memory and life. But the song was broken. Veins of a gray, crystalline substance snaked through the roots, silencing their light. Where the corruption spread, the roots turned brittle, and the very air grew cold and thin. The emerald arks were not vessels hidden away, but this, a living, planetary root network designed to preserve the essence of forests through global winters and fiery cataclysms. And it was under a silent, systematic attack. Moving forward was like walking through a dying lung. The corrupted sections felt dead, leaching the warmth from her skin, while the healthy roots seemed to reach for her, their light brightening as she passed. The gray crystals reacted to her presence, their sharp edges twitching as if sensing the life she carried. She had to move carefully, avoiding their touch, knowing they hungered for the very energy the seed possessed. The sheer scale of the assault was overwhelming, a planetary infection. How could one person possibly fight this? The answer came not as a thought, but as an instinct. Pressing the seed against a small, healthy root node, she poured her will into it, not to heal the corruption, but to fortify. A sphere of lush, vibrant moss and glowing fungi erupted around her, a tiny oasis of defiant life in the cavern of decay. For a moment, the air was sweet and warm. It was proof. The corruption could be resisted. That moment of triumph was a beacon. The gray crystals embedded in the roots nearest her sanctuary began to vibrate, emitting a high, piercing frequency that felt like needles in her mind. They weren't just inert minerals. They were sensory organs, and she had just announced her presence with a flare. The subtle leeching she had felt before was now a focused, predatory attention. The vibrations synchronized, turning the cavern's hum into a dissonant chord of pursuit. She was no longer an explorer or a medic. She was prey, and the hunter now knew exactly where she was. The cavern wall fractured with a sound like shattering ice. A figure of shifting gray crystal pulled itself from the stone, its form a jagged, horrifying geometry of sharp angles and piercing points. It had no face, but Alara felt its focus lock onto the emerald seed in her hand. This was the hunter. It lunged, and her scientific mind screamed for data, for a weakness, but her body reacted on instinct. Force was impossible. Instead, she threw her will through the seed, not as a weapon, but as a plea. The healthy roots lining the cavern floor responded instantly, surging upward like emerald pythons to coil around the crystal limbs. The hunter thrashed, its progress slowed but not stopped, the roots snapping like dry twigs under its relentless strength. Its intelligence was undeniable. It did not simply attack, it adapted its movements, learning the roots' patterns as it broke them. This was no mindless infection, but a directed, sentient force of consumption. Alara turned and ran, her breath catching in the thin air. A fork in the tunnel appeared ahead. One path glowed with the strong, steady pulse of the root network's heart. The other plunged into deeper, colder darkness. The choice was instant. She could not lead this thing to the core of the Arks. Swerving away from the light, she sacrificed potential sanctuary for the greater good, drawing the hunter after her into the unknown. Her flight became a desperate blur. The caverns twisted into a labyrinth of stone and faintly glowing fungi. Her world reduced to the pounding of her heart and the relentless scrape of crystal on rock behind her. The hunter was learning, anticipating her turns, her attempts to lose it in side passages. It was hurting her. The air grew colder, and the comforting hum of the roots faded into an eerie silence, broken only by the pursuit. She was getting farther from any possible help, deeper into a territory even the Arks seemed to have abandoned. The tunnel ended abruptly at a sheer cliff edge. A chasm opened before her, so deep its bottom was lost in a soft, ethereal glow. She skidded to a halt, sending pebbles cascading into the void. The scraping sound from the tunnel behind her grew louder, more deliberate. The hunter had her cornered. There was no time to think, only to act. With the crystal construct emerging from the passageway, its form blocking any retreat, Alara took a final breath and leaped into the glowing unknown. The fall was not a plummet, but a slow drift through a soft, golden light. The emerald seed cradled her, its energy wrapping around her like a gentle current, lowering her until her boots touched a mossy floor. She stood in a breathtaking grove, hidden deep within the chasm. Giant, luminous fungi cast a serene blue and green glow upon trees, whose bark shimmered with a pearlescent sheen. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming night flowers. Here, the gray corruption was entirely absent. This was a sanctuary, one of the Ark's innermost heartwood chambers, preserved against the decay spreading above. Her eyes were drawn to the center of the grove, where one tree stood apart, its trunk so wide it would take 20 people to circle it. Its bark was smooth and deep violet, and within its core, pulses of light swirled like captured galaxies. As she approached, she understood. This was no ordinary tree. It was a library, a living repository of the planet's memory. Tentatively, she reached out and pressed her palm against its cool surface. A flood of visions consumed her. She saw the world in its youth, then shuddering under the impact of a colossal asteroid, the sky turning to fire, but she did not see mass extinction. Instead, she saw the root network below flare with immense power, pulling the essence of entire forests, their genetic blueprints, their collective memory, deep into the planetary safe, holding them in stasis while the surface burned. She witnessed a global ice age, the slow creep of glaciers, and again, the Ark's retreat, a strategic withdrawal to preserve the core of life until the thaw. The Arks were not just shelters, they were a planetary immune system, and they had succeeded through every catastrophe. The visions shifted, pulling her toward the present crisis. This was not a rock from space or a natural shift in climate. This was a systematic, intelligent consumption. She saw the life force of the modern world, the vibrant energy of jungles, the quiet strength of old-growth forests, being siphoned away through that gray crystalline network, drawn out like water from a well. The Arks were the last reservoir, the final well that had not yet been tapped. The hunter was not just chasing her, it was trying to starve the last source of resistance. Time was a luxury she did not have. She could feel a distant, persistent scraping, the hunter methodically searching for a path down into her sanctuary. To understand how to fight this, she needed more than glimpses. She needed to become a part of the memory, making a choice that filled her with both dread and resolve. Alara placed both hands on the violet tree and the emerald seed against her chest. She did not just observe this time, she asked to join. She let her consciousness flow into the stream of ages, surrendering to the deep, living past. The risk was immediate and terrifying. The line between her own identity and the countless lives stored within the tree began to blur. She was a fern in a primordial swamp, a towering redwood witnessing the birth of a river, a tiny blossom crushed under the foot of a long-extinct creature. She fought to hold onto Alara, the botanist from a world above, clinging to that single thread of self. In the midst of this chaos, one memory stabilized, clear and potent. It was from an age after a great cataclysm, as life was struggling to re-emerge. A presence moved through the young forests, not a human, but a consciousness of pure, nurturing energy. It was a guardian, a manifestation of the Ark's will, guiding the resurgent life, healing wounded lands and standing watch. As this vision faded, a profound realization washed over her. The guardian was not a thing of the past. It was a role, a function that could be awakened. Pulling back from the tree was like surfacing from a deep ocean. She gasped, stumbling backward, her own body feeling strange and new. But the most startling change was not within her. It was a sensation that bloomed in the back of her mind, a familiar, benevolent warmth, now stirring elsewhere in the vast root network. The memory of the guardian had not just been a lesson, it had been a call, and somewhere in the darkness of the Ark, something ancient had begun to answer. The benevolent warmth she had sensed solidified into a figure, coalescing from the very light of the grove. He was tall, his form seeming woven from living wood and strands of solidified moonlight, but his movements were stiff, his light flickering with profound exhaustion. This was Kalen, the last guardian, and his ancient eyes held no welcome, only a deep and weary suspicion. He did not see a potential ally in Alara. He saw a trespasser from the scarred world above, a world he had watched consume itself. Before she could speak, a vine as hard as iron shot from the ground, wrapping tightly around her wrist. The grip was not meant to injure, but to contain, to isolate the threat he believed her to be. The emerald seed, however, flared in response, its pure, vibrant light washing over the restraining vine. The plant immediately softened, unfurling from her arm, and instead curling gently around her fingers in a gesture of recognition. Kalen recoiled as if struck, his stern expression crumbling into pure, unguarded shock. He had not felt that particular energy signature in millennia. The seed was not just a key, it was a legacy, a direct line to the original creators of the Ark. His suspicion did not vanish, but it was now tempered by a bewildered, fragile hope. He became a reluctant ally, his voice a low rustle of leaves as he explained the long eons of his vigil. He spoke of the great slumber, a necessary dormancy to conserve energy after the last cataclysm, and his own slow weakening as the Ark's power was gradually drained by the corruption. His distrust of surface dwellers was a deep-rooted thing, born from witnessing the relentless expansion and carelessness of humanity. To him, the world above was already a lost cause, and its current blight was merely a symptom of its own inner sickness. Alara knew she had to bridge this chasm of time and tragedy. She did not argue with his painful memories. Instead, she shared her own. She spoke of her research outpost, not as a symbol of human intrusion, but as a place of study and reverence. She described the specific, heartbreaking changes she had documented, the silent forests, and the wilting she had fought to reverse. She showed him that while humanity had indeed caused great harm, it also held individuals who fought for preservation, who listened to the whispers of the world. She offered a partnership, a fusion of his ancient, foundational wisdom with her modern, specific understanding of the current threat. The alliance they formed in that hidden grove transformed the conflict entirely. It was no longer one woman's desperate quest. It was now an organized resistance, a union of the old world and the new. But by uniting, they also magnified their significance in the eyes of their enemy. They were no longer a nuisance and a dormant relic. They were a coordinated defense, a direct challenge to the consumption, and that made them a target worth eliminating with overwhelming force. Seeing the resolve in her eyes and the truth carried by the seed, Kalen gave a slow, solemn nod. His own hope, long buried, was a fragile sprout pushing through barren soil. "There is one place where we might rally a true defense," he said, his voice gaining a new, grim strength. "The Ark's heart, the core from which all this life once flowed. But if the corruption has reached it, then our hope, and the hope for every forest on this planet, will have already been extinguished." The path Kalen chose wound through the Ark's inner beauty and its hidden dangers. They moved through caverns where waterfalls of liquid light cascaded over glowing moss, and across bridges formed from the interwoven roots of sleeping giants. Yet this splendor was fractured. Veins of the gray corruption pulsed through the walls like diseased arteries, and the air near them grew thin and icy. When they found a small, weeping crack in a major root, Alara did not hesitate. Placing the seed against the wound, she focused, mending the breach with a surge of emerald energy that left the root whole and humming. Each small healing was a conversation, a shared breath between her and the vast consciousness around them. She could feel the Ark's gratitude, a warm resonance that flowed back into her, easing the fatigue the act cost her. More importantly, she felt Kalen's guarded stance soften with every success. He no longer watched her as a warden watches a prisoner, but as a seasoned warrior observes a promising recruit, his ancient eyes reflecting a dawning, reluctant respect. They could not afford to linger. The corruption was a web, and every pulse of life they restored was a tremor that could alert the hunter. Stealth was their only shield, speed their greatest weapon. When they reached a fork where two paths diverged, the choice was stark. One route, Kalen explained, was long and secure, winding through stable, monitored chambers. The other was a direct route through the shard fields, a territory of unstable, resonant crystal, volatile, and undoubtedly watched. "We do not have time for the safe road," Alara said, her voice firm despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "Every moment we delay brings the heart closer to silence." Her decision was a gamble, placing their fragile alliance and the fate of the Ark above their immediate safety. Kalen did not argue. His silent acceptance was the final seal on their partnership. The shard fields were a forest of jagged, translucent crystals that hummed with a dissonant energy. The very ground was a mosaic of fractured plates, and they picked their way through with painful slowness. Alara's boot dislodged a small, loose shard. It clattered against a larger crystal, the sound echoing through the cavernous space. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then, the hum around them intensified into a shriek. The gray veins in the crystals flared, and the ground beneath them trembled, not with the Ark's life, but with the vibration of a triggered mechanism. The crystalline floor gave way entirely, plunging them into a crushing, icy darkness. They landed in a deep, submerged chamber, the impact driving the air from their lungs. Kicking toward a faint glow, they broke the surface, gasping in the cold, damp air. They were in a flooded grotto, but the water was wrong. It was thick and silty, and drifting through it were tendrils of the gray corruption, not as solid crystals, but as a living, sentient algae that pulsed with a sickly light. The trap had not been meant to kill them. It had delivered them directly to a new, aquatic form of the enemy, one that now began to coil toward them through the dark water. The tendrils coiled through the murky water like a nest of starving serpents. Kalen reacted first, his hands moving in a swift, fluid motion. A pocket of air shimmered around them, pushing back the icy water just enough to give them a moment to breathe. But the corruption was already upon them, its sickly gray tendrils lashing against the barrier, searching for a weakness. Alara's mind raced. Purifying the entire grotto was impossible, but she could create a moving shield. Pressing the seed to the edge of Kalen's air pocket, she focused her will. A wave of emerald light radiated outward, and where it touched the tendrils, they recoiled, dissolving into harmless silt. For a few precious seconds, they had a clear path. They moved as one, a desperate, synchronized dance. Kalen would reshape the air, creating a temporary tunnel, and Alara would immediately cleanse the space he had secured. It was a perfect fusion of ancient power and modern instinct, a proof of concept born from sheer necessity. But the corruption was endless, regenerating from the silted floor faster than they could push forward. They were being worn down, their energy seeping away into the cold dark. Trapped in a shrinking pocket of air, with the tendrils closing in, Alara knew incremental defense was a path to exhaustion and death. She made a choice that felt less like thought and more like a primal scream from the seed itself. She would not defend, she would answer. Ignoring Kalen's shouted warning, she waded to the center of their air pocket, clutching the seed with both hands. She opened herself completely, becoming a conduit, and unleashed a single, blinding pulse of pure life force. The shockwave was silent and absolute. A sphere of emerald light exploded from her, washing through the water and the stone. Every tendril of corruption in the grotto vaporized instantly. The murky water cleared to a crystalline blue, and for a breathtaking moment, the entire cavern hummed with a vibrant, restored song. Then the cost hit her. Her legs gave way, and she would have sunk if Kalen had not caught her. A deep, hollow ache settled in her bones, and her vision swam. The gamble had worked, but the energy spike was a beacon, a thunderclap in the silent war. Their enemy now knew exactly where they were, and the potent threat they represented. As the last echoes of the pulse faded, a section of the grotto wall, now clean of corruption, crumbled away, not into darkness, but into a soft, overwhelming radiance. The exit was there. Supporting her, Kalen led them through the new opening, and they emerged into the presence of the Ark's heart. It was a tree of pure, solidified light, its roots woven into the fabric of the cavern, and its branches holding up the very sky of that subterranean world. But its brilliant pulse was faltering, its light dimmed by thick, choking veins of gray crystal that climbed its trunk like a terminal disease. They had found the core of all life, and they were just in time to witness its final, failing breaths. The heart of the Ark hung before them, a colossal, slowly spinning orb of condensed emerald light. Its surface should have been a perfect, seamless energy, but now it was a battlefield. Thick veins of gray crystal crawled across its luminous skin like parasitic vines, each pulse of the heart growing weaker, its light dimming under the suffocating weight. In that terrible, beautiful sight, everything became clear. The wilting forests on the surface, the stolen vitality, it was all a symptom. The true war was here, in this chamber, for the very core of the world's memory. Protecting this heart was not just an option, it was the only path to saving every ancient wood that remained. But how do you fight an infection on a being of pure energy without causing more harm? A direct assault could shatter it, unleashing a cataclysm that would make all past extinctions seem minor. Alara watched the slow, sickening creep of the gray and knew they could not fight it inch by inch. It was like trying to remove a poison from a bloodstream, one cell at a time. Her gaze fell to the seed, pulsing in sync with the heart's faltering rhythm. It was not a weapon, it was a key. An idea, terrifying and brilliant, took root. "We do not fight the corruption," she said, her voice barely a whisper yet ringing with certainty. "We give the heart the strength to fight for itself. We use the seed to overcharge it, to awaken its own immune system." Kalen stared at her, his ancient face etched with a horror that spoke of eons of caution. "You propose we pour raw, untempered energy into the most volatile source of life on the planet. It could create a feedback loop, a chain reaction that would not purge the corruption, but vaporize this entire ark and everything connected to it. It is the only chance we have for a victory that lasts," Alara countered, her hand tightening around the seed. "A slow, careful defense will only delay the end." "This is a risk we must take. The fate of every forest, every leaf and root, hung on this single, desperate gamble." As they moved into position, the very air in the chamber grew heavy with anticipation. The gray crystals seemed to sense their intent, pulsing faster, digging deeper. Then the temperature plummeted. From the deepest shadows of the cavern, a form began to pull itself into being. It was not a crystal hunter this time, but a swirling vortex of absolute nothingness, a being of pure consuming hunger given shape. It had no eyes, but its attention fixed on them and on the vulnerable heart, with a final, devastating intent to feed. The vortex of consuming darkness solidified into a shifting form of impossible angles and silent screams. It was the Devourer, and its presence extinguished the light not by blocking it, but by drinking it. A voice, cold and vast as the void between stars, echoed not in the air, but directly in their minds. It spoke not of hatred, but of a terrible, simple necessity. "We are the answer to entropy," it stated. "All life is a temporary, chaotic flame that burns resources to ash. We bring order. We preserve the essential energy of worlds within ourselves, a perfect, eternal library, free from the mess of decay and the pain of loss. Your resistance is not brave, it is inefficient. Join us. Your unique essences would be valued. You would witness the end of all suffering." The confrontation shattered the physical plane, becoming a war for their very souls. The offer was a poison, wrapped in the seductive logic of ultimate peace. Alara felt its pull, a promise of an end to her exhaustion and fear. But then she saw the memory the Ark had shown her, the fern in the swamp, the redwood by the river, the blossom under the ancient foot. It was the chaos, the beautiful, unpredictable struggle of life that gave it meaning. Her voice was clear and unwavering. a single note of defiance in the crushing silence. I choose the mess. I choose the struggle. I choose life. Her rejection was a spark in a room of gunpowder. The Devourer's cold logic shattered into a wave of pure, focused rage. The gray veins on the heart flared, digging deeper, and the colossal orb of light groaned as its light dimmed further. The philosophical battle was over. The physical one was now a race against annihilation. There is no more time, Kalen shouted, his form blazing with a final, desperate light. He did not wait for a reply. Turning from the heart, he lunged toward the Devourer, his own ancient power flaring into a shield of woven roots and solidified moonlight. It was a holding action, a sacrifice to buy her mere seconds against an unstoppable tide. Trusting him with everything, Alara turned her back on the battle. She placed both hands on the faltering heart, the emerald seed pressed between her palm and its luminous, wounded surface. She poured her will into it, not as a gentle stream, but as a floodgate opened wide. She channeled every memory, every hope, every cherished moment of a living world through the seed and into the heart. A desperate transfusion of raw, chaotic, beautiful life. The world dissolved into pure, screaming light. Alara's consciousness flowed into the Ark's heart, not as an intruder, but as a single drop of water joining a stormy ocean. She was adrift in a maelstrom of ancient memories and raw, untamed power, her own identity threatening to unravel at any second. The gray crystals were not just a physical infection here, but a dissonant chord, a screeching wrongness woven into the heart's beautiful, complex song. To attack them directly would be to shred the symphony itself, so she became a conductor. She focused the emerald seed's energy not as a weapon, but as a tuning fork, a point of perfect, resonant harmony. She sought the heart's core frequency, the fundamental note of its existence, and poured all her will into amplifying it. A blinding, emerald pulse erupted from the heart, washing through the cavern. The gray crystals infesting its surface did not just crack, they screamed into dust, their parasitic forms unable to exist in the presence of that restored, overwhelming song of life. But the victory had a terrible cost. Every pulse of cleansing light was drawn directly from her. She could feel her own life force being siphoned away, a chilling emptiness spreading from her core to her fingertips. Her physical body, still standing with hands pressed to the heart, grew cold and faint. She was a wick burning at both ends, and the flame was guttering out. In the periphery of her awareness, she saw Kalen's shield of moonlight shatter. The Devourer swatted him aside, and the ancient guardian crumpled, his light fading to a dim flicker against the cavern wall. She was alone. The heart needed more, a final, permanent surge to lock in its purification and ensure it could never be silenced again. The choice was absolute and without hesitation. She did not just give her energy, she offered a covenant. She willingly severed a fundamental portion of her own vitality, a piece of her very soul, and wove it directly into the heart's luminous core. The act completed the circuit. The Ark's heart blazed with the intensity of a newborn star, its light so pure and powerful, it scoured the last vestiges of corruption from the chamber, healing the very stone. But for Alara, the world snapped back into a painful, muted reality. She collapsed to her knees, gasping, her body now feeling thin and fragile, as if made of glass. The vibrant connection to the living world she had always known was now a distant whisper. She had traded a part of her own life to save all others. The purified heart thrummed with invincible power, its energy field now impervious to the Devourer's touch. Enraged and severed from its source of sustenance, the entity of nothingness let out a silent howl of pure fury. It abandoned its vast form, condensing its entire being into a single, spear-like point of absolute anti-life energy. Its target was no longer the Ark. It was the one who had caused its failure, the one who was now mortal and weak. The spear of void shot across the chamber, aimed directly at Alara's heart. The spear of nothingness flew across the chamber, a silent promise of absolute end. Kalen did not think, he simply was. He moved in a blur of fading moonlight, placing his own form between the attack and Alara. There was no grand explosion, only a terrible, soundless consumption. The Devourer's final weapon struck him fully, and he did not block it. He accepted it. His body, woven from ancient guardian energy, flared with a brilliance that had not been seen in millennia, and he wrapped that light around the void spear, smothering it, unmaking it with the very essence of his being. For a single, eternal moment, Kalen and the Devourer were a collapsing star of opposing forces. Then, both were gone. The crushing pressure in the chamber vanished, replaced by a profound and aching silence. The only light came from the steadily pulsing heart, now whole and secure. Alara stared at the empty space where the ancient guardian had stood. The cost of their victory settled upon her shoulders, a weight more immense than any mountain. He had guarded the memory of life for eons, and his final act was to guard her. She was alone. Grief was a luxury her exhausted body could not afford. Pushing herself to her feet, every movement a struggle, she faced the radiant heart. It was safe, but it was vulnerable, like a patient after a life-saving surgery. It needed time to heal, to integrate the new strength she had given it, without any threat of interruption, using the last dregs of her own strength, a faint echo of the power she had willingly sacrificed. She placed her hands upon the chamber walls. She did not command the Ark, she asked it. In response, the roots and stone of the cavern shifted, groaning as they wove themselves into an impenetrable seal around the heart chamber, a living tomb that would protect the world's core through its long recovery. The immediate battle was won. The Ark was saved, but as she looked at the sealed entrance, a cold realization took root. The world above remained wounded, its forests still whispering of the blight that had touched them. Kalen was gone. The responsibility for healing that world now rested entirely on her shoulders, a burden she felt too frail to carry. Then, something drifted down from the cavern's ceiling, a soft, luminous mote of green and silver light. It landed gently in her open palm. It was a seed, but unlike the first, this one pulsed with a familiar, benevolent warmth, a tiny, condensed echo of Kalen's own spirit. It was not a weapon or a key. It was a promise. It was a new beginning and a purpose she would have to learn to grow on her own. The forest breathed again. Where brittle branches and wilted leaves had been, Alara now walked beneath a canopy of impossible green. The air itself felt different, thick with the scent of blooming life and damp, rich soil. The unnatural silence was gone, replaced by the busy hum of insects and the tentative songs of returning birds. The blight had not just ended, it had been replaced by a vitality that felt almost exuberant, as if the land itself was celebrating its own salvation. Her journey back to the research outpost was a walk through a world reborn, yet every vibrant leaf was a reminder of the profound cost paid in the darkness below. Her arrival at the outpost caused a quiet stir. Dr. Arks met her at the door, his face a canvas of relief and utter bewilderment. "Ilara, we were preparing for a total collapse," he said, his voice hushed with awe. Then, 2 days ago, it just reversed. The spectral data is off the charts. This isn't just recovery, it's a super bloom. He gestured to the monitors displaying graphs of unprecedented chlorophyll production and soil health. Her colleagues buzzed with excitement, theorizing about sudden microbial shifts or an unknown atmospheric event. They saw a miracle of science, a puzzle to be solved. Ilara offered them a quiet, tired smile, but her eyes were distant. The celebratory chatter felt like it was happening in another room, to another person. The woman who had left this outpost was gone, replaced by someone who had felt the soul of the planet and willingly fractured a piece of her own to save it. Her body felt thin, a fragile vessel holding a profound and lonely grief. The vibrant energy of the world was a painful contrast to the hollow echo inside her, the space where a direct connection to life had once hummed. When Dr. Arks pulled her aside, his expression turning serious, she knew the question was coming. He asked her directly what she had seen, what data she had collected in the deep woods. He sensed there was more to the story. This was her moment of choice. She could have told him about the root network, the heart, the guardian who had given his life. She could have unveiled the truth of the Emerald Arks, but looking at his face, alight with scientific curiosity, she understood a fundamental truth. This knowledge was not a data set to be published. It was a sacred trust. To reveal it would be to risk it being cataloged, exploited, or worse, invaded by those who would see it as a resource rather than a sanctuary. So she made her decision. She spoke of discovering a unique geological formation that seemed to emit powerful volatile organic compounds, of strange soil compositions that might explain the localized reversal. It was a story built on half-truths, a shield to protect a mystery too vast for their world to comprehend. She saw the flicker of disappointment in his eyes, a sense that she was holding back, but he accepted her professional assessment. The lie created a final, unspoken distance between her and the life she had once known. This choice to become the sole keeper of the secret transformed her purpose. She could no longer be just a botanist in a lab. The memory of Kaelin and the living heart demanded more. She left the structured confines of the outpost and became a fierce, nomadic voice for the wild. She used her scientific credentials not to dissect, but to advocate, speaking at conferences and writing articles that argued for the intrinsic, unknowable value of ancient forests. Her passion was fueled by a secret certainty, a knowledge that these places were not just beautiful, they were essential, living anchors for the planet's very immune system. The work was fulfilling, but the solitude of her truth was a heavy cloak. She bore the weight of the Ark's existence alone, a solitary guardian in a world that had moved on, blissfully unaware of how close it had come to eternal silence. It was this very mission that eventually led her to a remote, uncharted valley, a place so pristine it felt outside of time, and as she placed her hand on the mossy ground to to feel the pulse of the soil. A familiar, gentle warmth answered her touch, a soft and sleeping rhythm that hinted at another ark slumbering peacefully beneath her feet. The soil of the secluded valley was soft and welcoming beneath her knees. With a reverence that felt like a prayer, Alara pressed the luminous seed into the earth. The moment it touched the ground, it flared with a gentle light, and the land itself seemed to sigh in response. A sapling erupted upward, not in a violent burst, but in a fluid, graceful unfolding of bark and leaf. Within minutes, it stood as a fully grown tree, its trunk the color of twilight and its leaves shimmering with a soft, internal silver light. This was no ordinary tree. It was a sentinel, its roots plunging deep to gently intertwine with the slumbering ark network below, and its branches reaching skyward as a subtle antenna for the world's vitality. It hummed with a familiar, protective presence, a living echo of Kalen's final gift. This magnificent tree became her sanctuary and her command post. She built a simple shelter within the cradle of its great roots, a place where the very air felt charged with peace and understanding. It was a living monument to all she had lost and all she had saved, a constant, breathing reminder of her purpose. Yet, this solitude was fractured by a profound tension. She was the only living bridge between the ancient, silent world of the Arks and the bustling, often careless modern world. Her desire to hide away and heal her own spiritual wounds warred daily with the crushing responsibility of that knowledge. One evening, sitting beneath the sentinel tree's luminous canopy, she made a vow not of words, but of bone-deep conviction. She would become a silent keeper. She would not reveal the Arks, but she would use her unique understanding to watch over the world's remaining ancient forests. She would subtly guide, using her scientific voice to advocate for protected corridors, and her deep, instinctual knowledge to nudge conservation efforts in the right direction. She would be a gardener for the planet's soul, working from the shadows to help humanity remember a harmony it had long forgotten. This was not a temporary duty. It was a lifelong sentence of vigilance, accepted with a sober heart. The victory over the Devourer had been absolute, but it had revealed a terrifying truth about the nature of the universe. Such entities of consumption were not a singular anomaly. They were a potentiality, a cosmic constant that sought to bring order through annihilation. The Arks had to be perpetually ready, and she was their first and only line of defense. This knowledge was a weight she would carry forever. As she tended to the soft moss at the base of her sentinel tree, her eyes fell upon a young sapling growing a short distance away. Its slender trunk was not stretching straight for the sun, but was subtly, unmistakably curved, leaning toward the luminous tree as if listening to a whispered story. The next generation was already learning, and in that small, hopeful tilt, Alara saw the fragile, enduring chain of guardianship begin anew. The child came with the morning light, a small figure appearing at the edge of the clearing with wide, curious eyes fixed on the luminous sentinel tree. Her name was Leora, a local girl who had found her way into the secluded valley, drawn by whispers of a silver-leaf giant that hummed with a strange, beautiful music. She returned the next day, and the day after that, each time venturing a little closer, her small hand often resting on the trunk of a passing sapling, as if in quiet greeting. Alara watched her from the shelter of her roots, a deep recognition stirring within her weary heart, the way the wildflowers seemed to lean toward the girl as she passed, the way a hesitant bird would land on a branch near her shoulder. It was all unmistakable. This was not learned behavior. It was an innate gift, a natural resonance with living things, just as her own had been before the emerald seed had awakened it fully. The sight filled her with a profound and painful conflict. To welcome this child was to potentially draw her into the same hidden war that had cost Kalen his existence. It was to place the weight of a cosmic secret on shoulders too young to bear it. The safer path, the protective one, was to gently turn her away, to let her believe the tree was just a beautiful oddity, and her gift merely a charming coincidence. But as the days turned into weeks, Alara saw the truth with crushing clarity. If she turned Leora away, if she let this connection wither, the knowledge of the Arks, the memory of the Guardian's sacrifice, and the wisdom of how to listen to the world would die with her. The responsibility was too immense to be hoarded. It was a trust that demanded to be passed on. The decision was a quiet one, made not in a single moment, but in the accumulation of Leora's silent, reverent visits. Alara did not speak of the heart or the Devourer. She did not mention the subterranean network of light. Instead, she began with the language she knew best, the simple grammar of the earth. She showed Leora how to feel the different textures of moss, explaining how each one told a story about the water and the sun. She taught her to sit perfectly still and listen to the conversations of the forest, not with her ears, but with her heart, to understand the difference between the contented rustle of a healthy leaf and the faint, thirsty whisper of a struggling one. These were not just botany lessons. They were exercises in empathy, in learning to see the forest not as a collection of things, but as a community of beings. One afternoon, Leora knelt beside a cluster of wild daisies that had been trampled by a passing animal, her small brow furrowed in concentration. She did not try to stand them up. Instead, she placed her palms flat on the soil beside their broken stems and closed her eyes, her breathing slow and deep. Alara watched, her own breath catching, as a faint, almost imperceptible green warmth seemed to emanate from the girl's hands. Slowly, tenderly, the daisies straightened, their petals lifting toward the sun, as if given a new reason to live. It was a tiny act, a whisper of power compared to the symphony Alara could once conduct. But in that small, perfect moment, she felt it. It was the same fragile, defiant hope that had first pulsed within the emerald seed, now taking root in a new heart, ensuring the story was far from over. A whisper of wrongness traveled through the roots of the world. Alara felt it as a sudden chill in the soil beneath her sanctuary, a faint, dissonant note in the forest's hum. Her eyes snapped open. This was not the overwhelming hunger of the Devourer, but a faint, lingering echo, like a single ember from a doused fire that had been carried on the wind to a new continent. It was a remnant of the great Blight, a pocket of the parasitic energy that had survived the heart's purification, now festering in a distant, ancient woodland. The call was not a scream for help, but a quiet, persistent cough in the planetary system she was now sworn to protect. It demanded action, but not an army. This was a task for a keeper. She prepared for the journey with a quiet efficiency Kalen would have recognized. Her tools were not weapons, but bundles of specific herbs, purified water from her sanctuary's spring, and a small pouch of smooth, resonant stones she had gathered from the Arks caverns. She chose to go alone, telling the few local contacts she had made that she was conducting a routine botanical survey. The lie was a necessary shield. To involve others would risk exposing a truth the world was not ready to face, and it would complicate a situation that required subtlety, not force. The forest on the new continent was a tapestry of gnarled oaks and deep shadows, a place of immense age and quiet dignity, but the Blight's echo had left its mark. A patch of trees stood listless, their leaves a dull, waxy green, and the usual chorus of insects and birds was muted. The energy here was not being violently sucked away, but slowly, subtly drained, like a battery left on a trickle charge. A direct application of her own power could purge it, but it would also be a massive, detectable flare in the ecosystem, and it would drain her severely. She needed a different approach, a quieter wisdom. She remembered a technique from the Ark's living memory, a lesson in harmony, not domination. Finding the central point of the dissonance, a small clearing where the air felt thin and cold, she began her work. She did not fight the Blight. Instead, she arranged the resonant stones in a precise geometric pattern around the affected area, charging each one with a gentle pulse of restorative energy from her own hands. She then buried specific herbs at the cardinal points, their natural properties amplified by her intent to cleanse and soothe. This was not a wall or a scalpel, but a tuning device. It would emit a constant, low-frequency harmonic resonance that would gently unravel the gray energy's structure over several weeks, neutralizing it without a single violent tremor. The process was slow and methodical, a test of her patience as much as her skill. She stayed for days, monitoring the subtle shifts, making tiny adjustments to the crystal network as the forest's own natural energy began to reassert itself. She watched as the dull green of the leaves slowly deepened into a healthy emerald, and one morning, the sound of a woodpecker echoed through the trees, a sure sign of returning vitality. The Blight's echo was being silenced, not with a shout, but with a sustained, perfect chord. Leaving the forest felt different from her previous departures. There was no crushing grief, no terrifying cost. There was only the quiet satisfaction of a problem understood and solved with the right tools. She had not needed Kalen's direct power, nor had she risked her own fragile spirit. She had used knowledge, patience, and a deep respect for the delicate balances of life. This small, successful containment was a profound confirmation. She was not just a survivor of a great war, she was a competent keeper, a true guardian. Yet, the victory was also a sobering reminder. The aftermath of the cosmic conflict was not a single, clean end. It was a long-term recovery, requiring perpetual vigilance against scattered, lingering sparks. As she walked away from the now healthy woods, she knew this would be the pattern of her life, a quiet, endless watch against the echoes of a darkness that had almost won. The world was healing in ways only she could fully appreciate. On her long journey back from the contained Blight, Alara walked through landscapes transformed. Rivers that had once run murky with silt now flowed with a clarity that mirrored the sky, their banks lush with new growth. In regions once written off as barren, she saw the tracks of animals returning, their presence a quiet testament to a vitality they sensed but could not explain. She passed research stations where scientists gathered, their voices a hum of excited confusion as they celebrated an unprecedented global recovery, charting data that defied all their models. They toasted to a mystery, unaware they were celebrating a victory paid for with a guardian's life and a piece of her own soul. Each vibrant meadow and each clear stream was a balm on her weary spirit, a public reward for her most private sacrifice. Yet, walking through a town where people casually enjoyed the shade of a resurgent park, a sharp pang of loneliness pierced her heart. She wished, for a fleeting moment, that she could point to the thriving world and say, "I did this. We did this." She yearned to share the truth of Kalen's sacrifice, to have someone understand the weight and the wonder of it all. But the silence was her vow, a necessary shield to protect the delicate truth from a world not yet ready to bear it. She watched children laughing under the strong limbs of an old oak, its leaves a deeper green than any could remember, and her resolution hardened. Her credit was not in a byline or acknowledgement, but in the very breath of the forest, in the return of the bird song. Recognition was a fleeting, hollow thing compared to the enduring reality of a healed ecosystem. Her purpose was not to be known, but to know, to serve as the quiet hand that steadied the balance. This internal acceptance did not ease her solitude, but it gave that solitude a profound meaning, forging her into a keeper of unwavering focus. Her path, now guided by this renewed resolve, led her away from the verdant lands and toward the stark, sun-bleached edge of a vast desert. The wind here was a dry rasp, scouring the earth and piling sand into endless, shifting dunes. But as she stood at the desolate border, a faint sensation brushed against the edges of her awareness, a thread of feeling woven into the dry air. It was not the shout of a blight or the song of a healthy forest. It was a whisper, a desperate, parched call for life, emanating from something ancient and deep beneath the crushing weight of the sand. The desert's whisper was a dry rasp against her senses, a plea from an ancient heart buried deep beneath the dunes. Following the faint thread of feeling, Alara walked for days, her feet sinking into the shifting sands until she stood before a weathered stone archway, almost completely swallowed by the encroaching desert. This was no grand entrance, but a forgotten exhale, a mouth choked with the dust of ages. Inside, the cavern was a tomb of silence. The vast root network was there, but it was petrified, its luminous veins dimmed to a faint, ghostly gray. At its center, the heart of this ark was a shrunken, crystalline husk, its light reduced to a single, struggling pulse, no brighter than a dying ember. This was not a battlefield like the first ark, but a hospice. She understood with a sinking heart that not all the sanctuaries had survived the long eons intact. Some, like this one, had been too damaged by past cataclysms, their energy so depleted in a final, desperate preservation effort that they had fallen into a hibernation from which they could not wake. The sheer scale of the task before her was humbling. To attempt a forceful awakening, to channel the kind of energy that had purified the first heart, would be like trying to jump-start a star with a match. The fragile structure would shatter under the strain, turning this last flicker into eternal darkness. The choice was clear, and it demanded a different kind of strength entirely. Force was the language of the Devourer. Her answer would be the language of life itself. She would not awaken this ark. She would nurse it. Her project began not with a brilliant flash of power, but with the patient placement of a single stone. She used her knowledge of geology and hydrology, of ancient riverbeds and hidden aquifers, to begin the slow, meticulous work of guiding water back to this parched land. She did not command the water to flow. She simply reminded it of its old paths, clearing obstructions and carving subtle channels that encouraged the rare desert rains to seep deep into the earth, down to where the slumbering roots could drink. She planted hardy, deep-rooted grasses to hold the soil, then drought-resistant shrubs, each one a tiny anchor for a future forest. This was not botany. It was a conversation with a continent, a dialogue conducted over years and then decades. The desert did not transform overnight. The change was glacial, almost imperceptible from one season to the next. But slowly, stubbornly, the edges of the barren land began to soften. A ribbon of green followed the path of a rejuvenated stream. Hardy wildflowers dotted the landscape after the rains, their brief, brilliant lives adding another layer of vitality to the soil. Her own sanctuary became a permanent home built near the hidden entrance, a simple structure of stone and woven branches that was as much a part of the landscape as the sentinel tree she tended. Her life became the rhythm of the seasons, her own vitality intertwined with the slow, steady strengthening of the pulse deep below. The work was her meditation, her atonement, and her purpose fused into one. She was no longer a warrior who had won a great battle, but a gardener tending the most patient of seeds, understanding that some wounds of the world are so deep that their healing must be measured not in years, but in lifetimes. And as the green slowly crept across the sands, a quiet testament to her persistence, the desert began to keep its own secret, guarding the sleeper below until the day it might be strong enough to dream once more. The legacy tree's branches now formed a cathedral of living wood, its twilight trunk so vast Alara could no longer encircle it with her arms. Its silver leaves hummed with a gentle, constant music, and the air beneath its canopy was perpetually charged with a sense of profound peace. One morning, she found the first seed. It lay cradled in a bed of moss at the tree's base, a small, smooth sphere that glowed with a soft, internal green light. It was not as potent as the original emerald seed she had carried, but it pulsed with the same familiar, benevolent warmth. It was a piece of Kalen's spirit, refined and made sustainable, a gift the tree now produced in quiet abundance. These seeds became the land's quiet miracle. A farmer, whose well had run dry for weeks, found a spring bubbling to life after placing a seed at its source. A blighted orchard, struck by a strange mold, recovered in days when a seed was buried at its heart. The tree's energy was not for grand acts of creation, but for gentle restoration and steadfast protection, a subtle reinforcement of the natural order. Yet, miracles attract attention. Rumors of a magical tree and its healing seeds began to drift beyond the secluded valley. She turned away a team of corporate botanists who arrived with sterile cases and scanning equipment, their eyes fixed on profit. She gently dissuaded a spiritual seeker who wanted to grind a seed into a potion for personal enlightenment. Each encounter was a delicate, draining act of defense, forcing her to stand as a silent wall between a sacred trust and a world that only understood consumption. The choice of who was worthy became her most solemn responsibility. She did not seek the powerful or the pious. She watched for the quiet ones, like Leora, whose hands instinctively soothed a frightened animal, or who walked through a meadow without crushing a single stem. To these individuals, her small community of nature tenders, she entrusted the seeds. She did not give them commands, but lessons. She taught them to listen to the whispered needs of the land, to use the seeds not as tools for their own will, but as offerings to help a wounded place heal itself. They learned to be stewards, never masters. This was the true beginning. Her solitary vigil transformed into a school without walls, its curriculum written in the language of the soil and the rhythm of the seasons. The legacy tree was its heart, and her students, the first new keepers, were its roots, spreading a quiet understanding into the world. Her personal mission, once a burden carried alone, was now a living tradition, an institution that would endure long after she was gone. And as she watched her students teach their own lessons beneath the humming boughs, she felt the lonely weight she had carried for so long finally begin to lighten, shared across a growing network of caring hands. A new rhythm began to beat beneath the familiar hum of the legacy tree. It was not a sound, but a sensation, a series of faint, coordinated pulses that traveled up through the roots and into Alara's very soul. They came from every corner of the globe, each with its own unique signature, a quiet, harmonious greeting from the other Emerald Arks. They were not crying for help, but simply saying, "We are here, and we feel you." The profound loneliness that had been her constant companion for so long cracked open, replaced by a staggering realization: she was not the last keeper. Scattered across the world, in hidden valleys and beneath silent mountains, other guardians tended their own sanctuaries. They had felt her long, patient work with the Desert Ark, and now, with the network stabilized, they were reaching out. The potential was dizzying. A global community, a shared knowledge spanning millennia, a united front against any darkness. But with that hope came a sharp, familiar fear. Every pulse sent through the network was a signal, a ripple in a pond that more than just friendly eyes might see. To announce their presence to each other was to potentially paint a target on every hidden heart of the world. The choice was a delicate one, a balance between the desperate need for connection and the solemn duty of protection. Closing her eyes, she placed her palms against the legacy tree's trunk. She did not send a complex message or a cry for fellowship. Instead, she focused all her gratitude, all her hard-won peace, into a single, simple chord of energy, and sent it flowing back along the pathways it had come. It was a message of solidarity, not an invitation for conversation. For now, that was enough. That first, cautious hello did not just open a line of communication. It planted the seed for a future she had never dared to envision. A planetary tapestry of guardians whose combined strength could shield the world from any storm. The acknowledgement from her unseen peers settled deep within her, a warmth that finally, after so long, began to mend the cold, hollow space left by Kalen's sacrifice, filling it with a profound and quiet sense of belonging. The world's quiet recovery had not gone unnoticed. Dr. Lena Vance arrived at the edge of the valley, not as a pilgrim, but as a detective. A renowned ecologist and historian, she had spent the last 5 years mapping the inexplicable global regreening, and her data pointed here, to this secluded basin, as the statistical epicenter. Her request for a meeting was polite, professional, and backed by a formidable intellect that had already ruled out every conventional explanation. Alara felt the approach not as a spiritual intrusion, but as the quiet, methodical click of a lock being picked by someone who understood the mechanism perfectly. Agreeing to meet was a calculated risk. Dr. Vance was not seeking a myth. She was hunting for a missing variable in a planetary equation. To deny her would only deepen her suspicion, turning a professional curiosity into a personal obsession. Alara prepared for the encounter as if for a delicate surgical procedure, deciding in advance which truths to present and which to leave safely buried. She would feed the scientists' hunger for data, but with a carefully curated menu. When Dr. Vance stood before the legacy tree, her reaction was not one of mystical awe, but of intense, focused analysis. She noted the unique spectral signature of its leaves, the anomalous composition of the soil, the way the local biodiversity seemed to operate at an efficiency she had never recorded. She fired off precise, insightful questions about mycorrhizal networks and atmospheric particulates. Alara answered each one with the expertise of a master botanist, sharing reams of non-classified data she had gathered over decades, presenting the valley as a unique, self-sustaining ecosystem born of rare geological and biological synergy. She spoke of specialized fungi and mineral deposits, offering plausible, scientific reasons for the miracles Dr. Vance had been tracking. The tension of the meeting was not in a confrontation, but in a dance of intellects. Alara had to constantly gauge how much information was just enough to satisfy the doctor's brilliant, deductive mind, without ever tipping into the realm of the impossible. She presented herself as a reclusive expert who had simply been fortunate enough to dedicate her life to studying this one extraordinary place. It was a performance that required every ounce of her knowledge and composure. The result was a strategic victory, more valuable than any secret shared. Dr. Vance departed not with answers about Arks or Guardians, but with a new, compelling thesis. She would become the Valley's most powerful advocate, using her considerable reputation to argue for its absolute protected status, based on its unparalleled scientific value. In essence, she would craft the perfect cover story, one so respectable and data-driven that it would deter more casual curiosity and even corporate interest. Watching the doctor's jeep disappear down the mountain trail, a genuine smile touched Alara's lips. The secret of the Ark would now be hidden in plain sight, guarded not by silence alone, but by the formidable gates of academic respectability. This new alliance was a shield, and for the first time, she felt she had an active partner in the world above, one who fought for the same cause, even if she never knew the true reason why. The forest felt different now, its vibrant hum a constant, reassuring presence that no longer demanded her constant vigilance. It was in this deep, earned peace that Alara first noticed the subtle change in her own rhythm. Her connection to the Arks had stretched her vitality across more seasons than any record could account for. But time, even for a keeper, was not a circle. It was a river, and she could feel its current beginning to slow within her. The knowledge was not a fear, but a quiet signal, a final item on a very long list of duties. It was time to pass the seed. Anya, the once curious child, was now a woman whose calm presence seemed to steady the very air. She had grown into her innate gift, her understanding of the living world not as a set of facts, but as a fluent language she spoke with her hands and her heart. Watching her gently coax a faltering sapling back to health without a single spoken word, Alara saw not a student, but a mirror of her own younger self, tempered by a wisdom that had been earned through patience, not catastrophe. The formal passing of responsibility was not a grand ceremony. They stood together beneath the legacy tree, its luminous leaves casting a soft, dappled light upon them. Ilara's voice was soft, almost lost in the tree's gentle hum. "This is not a command, Anya," she said. "It is a question the world asks of you. You can say no." To walk away would not be a failure. It would simply be a different path. The weight of the offer settled between them. Ilara's own struggle was a silent tempest within. Letting go of this duty felt like unthreading a part of her own soul. This purpose had defined her, saved her, and cost her more than anyone would ever know. To release it was to face the woman she was without it. For Anya, the weight was equally immense. This was not just tending a garden, it was becoming the anchor for a mystery that held the planet's memory. The silence stretched, filled only by the whisper of leaves. Then Anya spoke, her voice clear and steady. "I choose the trust. I choose the watch." There were no grand oaths, only that simple, profound acceptance. In that moment, the legacy Ilara had painstakingly built transformed from a solitary vow into a sustainable line of succession. The work would continue. It would endure. With the mantle formally passed, a profound and unexpected stillness descended upon Ilara. The constant, low-level tension of guardianship, a burden she had carried for so long she had forgotten its weight, simply lifted. For the first time in a life defined by duty and sacrifice, her time was truly her own. She allowed herself to simply sit, her hand resting on the legacy tree's ancient bark, not in supplication or command, but in gratitude. Her gaze, once forever scanning the horizon for threats, now turned inward, toward the deepest, most silent parts of the forest, seeing them not as a responsibility, but as a home. Her final walk began not with sorrow, but with a quiet sense of homecoming. The ancient forest she had saved in her youth now stood as a testament to time, its canopy a vault of living memory. She moved slowly, her hand brushing bark she had once healed, feeling the immense, patient pulse of the Ark Network beneath the soil. It was a familiar rhythm, the same one that had echoed in the first emerald seed, and now it called her back. At the heart of the woods stood the mightiest tree, its roots sunk deep into the world's core. She settled at its base, the cool, rough bark a comfort against her back. Closing her eyes, she placed her palms flat against the trunk. This was not an end she faced with fear, but a threshold she approached with intention. She had spent a lifetime guarding this life, and now she would become a part of it. With a deep, conscious breath, she began to let go. She did not push her energy out, but simply relaxed the boundaries of herself, allowing the last vestiges of her personal vitality, her memories of Kaelin, of struggle and of peace, to flow back into the network. It was a final, willing gift, the ultimate act of unity. Her individual consciousness began to dissipate, not vanishing, but merging. The line between Ilara and the forest blurred, then faded entirely. She was the memory of the first fern in the primordial swamp, the resilience of the redwood, the gentle strength of the moss. Her story was no longer a tale she carried, but a thread woven permanently into the fabric of the forest's own epic. In the space where her physical form had rested, a new patch of moss began to bloom. It was unlike any other, its fronds shimmering with a soft, internal silver and green light, a permanent and vibrant marker of the keeper, who had chosen to return everything she was to the world she loved. The deep, resonant hum of the Ark Network was the first thing Anya felt each morning, a constant vibration beneath her feet that had become as natural as her own heartbeat. But one dawn, the vibration twisted into a discordant spike, a sharp shriek of pain from a distant, ancient woodland. Her eyes snapped open. It was not the familiar echo of the old Blight, but something new, something raw and violently mechanical. The sensation was a frantic, localized panic, the Ark's reaction to a deep, percussive drilling that was tearing into its subterranean veins. This was her trial, arriving not with a whisper, but with a roar. She was alone with this. Ilara's wisdom was a memory in the soil, but the direct line of her guidance was gone. Anya's own intuition, honed over years of quiet study, now had to be her compass. She understood the two-front war she had to wage. Above, she had to stop the physical assault. Below, she had to calm the Ark's instinct to defend itself, a reaction that could trigger seismic shifts, or a rapid, defensive withdrawal of life energy that would leave the surface forest a barren waste. Her first act was not to run, but to sit. Crossing her legs on the mossy ground, she placed her palms flat against the earth and sent a wave of calming reassurance through the network, a promise that help was coming. It was like trying to soothe a panicked giant with a whisper, but she felt the frantic pulse lessen, just for a moment, buying her precious time. The conflict was not one she could win with the Ark's own power. The enemy was a geothermal drilling corporation, armed with permits and profit margins. This was a battle for the world above, and she had to fight it with its own tools. She reached out to Dr. Lena Vance, the ecologist whose scientific authority provided the perfect shield. Anya did not speak of sentient root networks or planetary pain. She provided Dr. Vance with devastatingly precise data, showing how the drilling threatened a unique and fragile hydrological system, a web of underground aquifers that fed an entire region. She framed the fight not as a spiritual crusade, but as an urgent ecological necessity. Together, they orchestrated a swift, public campaign. Dr. Vance leveraged her academic credibility, while Anya mobilized their network of local stewards, the quiet tenders of the land who had been given the legacy tree's seeds. They spoke at town halls, presented evidence to environmental boards, and generated a wave of public pressure that the corporation could not ignore. Anya's strategy was a masterful blend of modern advocacy and ancient purpose, using the system to protect the secret that underpinned it all. Within a week, the permits were suspended, and the relentless drilling fell silent. The legal victory was only half the battle. The Ark's distress was a deep, throbbing wound. For 3 days and nights, Anya remained in deep meditation at the center of the affected woodland, her consciousness entwined with the wounded network. She did not command it to heal, but instead shared her own calm, her own steady rhythm, acting as a living balm for its trauma. She visualized the fractured veins of energy knitting back together, the chaotic vibrations settling back into a harmonious hum. It was an exhausting, soul-deep labor, a test of her endurance and the depth of her connection. When the Ark's pulse finally stabilized, returning to its slow, patient song, a profound quiet settled over the forest. As Anya rose on trembling legs, a gentle breeze stirred the canopy above. It carried a familiar scent, a specific blend of silver leaf and damp earth that she had known only in Ilara's presence. It was there for just a moment, a faint, approving whisper on the wind, a final blessing from her mentor. In that silent confirmation, Anya knew she was not simply filling a role. She had become the keeper, and the hidden network of guardians across the world felt it too, their quiet respect a new and steadying presence in the back of her mind. The legacy tree's clearing became a classroom without walls. Anya gathered a small circle of children from the local village, their faces a mix of curiosity and the distracted glow of screens they had reluctantly left behind. Among them was the same wide-eyed girl who had first found her way to Alara years ago, now a teenager named Maya. Her quiet watchfulness matured into a patient focus. Anya began not with facts, but with feeling. She asked them to sit with a single plant for 10 minutes, to note every insect that visited, every subtle shift in the light on its leaves, the way it bent in the wind. She was teaching them the alphabet of empathy, the foundational skill of seeing the forest not as scenery, but as a community of individuals. In their quiet observations, she saw the same spark of innate connection she herself had possessed, the same one Alara had nurtured in her. It was a profound confirmation. This deep, instinctual bond with life was not a rare miracle, but a latent potential in countless people, a frequency the noisy modern world had simply learned to tune out. The greatest challenge was not a lack of interest, but the constant pull of a digital world. Anya watched fingers twitch for absent phones, saw attention spans fray during long, silent watches. To force an ancient way onto a new generation would only push them away. She needed to build a bridge, so she adapted, weaving the very technology that distracted them into the fabric of their learning. She handed them simple data loggers and soil moisture sensors, showing them how to take readings from the forest floor. Suddenly, the abstract concept of a healthy ecosystem became a tangible graph on a screen. They could see the direct correlation between the placement of a legacy tree seed and a rise in local humidity, or a stabilization of soil pH. The technology did not replace the wonder, it validated it. It gave them scientific proof of the magic they were feeling, a language their modern minds could understand and trust. This decision to integrate rather than reject ensured the keeper's philosophy would not become a relic, but a living, evolving practice capable of speaking to every future generation. One afternoon, Maya was carefully calibrating a nutrient sensor near the base of the great tree. The device beeped, indicating a minor anomaly in a patch of soil that should have been depleted. Kneeling, she pushed aside a curtain of soft, silver-lit moss. There, nestled in the protective cradle of a root, was a cluster of flowers so small and delicate, they were nearly invisible. Their petals were a breathtaking, iridescent blue, a color she had never seen in any field guide. It was a completely unknown species of orchid, thriving in the microclimate fostered by the legacy tree. This was not just a new plant, it was a signal. The ecosystem was not merely recovering, it was innovating, generating new levels of complexity and beauty as a direct result of the sanctuary's stable, amplified life force. In that tiny, radiant blossom, Anya saw the future of their work, a promise that their guardianship would not only preserve the old world, but help usher in a new one. A new harmony resonated through the very bedrock of the world, a chord so profound and complete it silenced the ancient, low hum of vigilance in Anya's soul. Through the Ark Network, she felt it, as did every guardian across the globe, a sudden, breathtaking alignment. The planet's biosphere clicked into a state of equilibrium, not seen since the great forests of legend. Its collective life force no longer a desperate struggle, but a triumphant, self-sustaining symphony. This was the culmination of everything. Valara's sacrifice, Kalen's final stand, the patient tending of deserts, and the quiet lessons beneath the legacy tree. It had all led to this moment of perfect, planetary balance. They had not just averted a cataclysm, they had guided the world into a new age. Yet, with this profound victory, came a weight more subtle and demanding than any battle. The pressure to maintain this fragile, hard-won peace was immense. How do you protect a perfection you have helped create without becoming its jailer, or growing soft in its gentle light? Complacency was the new enemy, a silent decay that could rot the foundations of their work from within. In that shared, global moment of triumph, a decision was made, not in words, but in a synchronized pulse of intent that flowed through the root network. The guardians of the world made a silent, unanimous pact. They would not become rulers of this new age, celebrating their power. They would rededicate themselves as humble stewards, their watch eternal, their purpose forever renewed. The world was safe, for now, but the pact acknowledged a deeper, more enduring truth. The universe is vast and holds endless possibilities, and the duty to protect the flame of life against whatever may come from the darkness is a vow that never ends. As the symphony of a healed world played on, its melody woven into the wind and the water, Anya looked at her students, at Maya, carefully documenting a new blossom, and she felt a quiet certainty settle in her heart. They would be ready, whatever melody or dissonance the future chose to play. The next generation of keepers would be there to listen and to answer. Beneath the legacy tree's luminous canopy, Anya felt a presence deeper than memory. It was Alara's patience in the slow unfurling of a new leaf, Kalen's unwavering strength in the roots that gripped the living stone, and the quiet resolve of every keeper who had chosen this watch before her. The story of the Emerald Arks had completed its long journey from secret to foundation. It was no longer a whispered legend of survival against impossible odds, but a living, breathing promise woven into the very fabric of the thriving world. This is the ultimate lesson carried within every ancient forest. Cataclysms will come, darkness will rise, but life is not a fragile candle flame to be sheltered. It is a resilient, brilliant seed. When nurtured by courage, watered by sacrifice, and sheltered by selfless guardianship, that seed does not merely persist. It digs its roots deeper. It reaches for the sun with greater vigor. It learns, it adapts, and it flourishes in ways once thought impossible. The ancient woods we walk among today are not passive relics of a bygone age. They are active, vibrant partners in a planetary symphony. Their deep, silent song of resilience and interconnection hums just below the surface of our perception, a constant reminder of the balance we are all a part of. And in the quiet spaces between their roots, the keepers remain, the latest in an unbroken line of guardians, ensuring that this ancient, beautiful music never falls silent.